Well, I was born in 1936, which makes me quite ancient. And the reason I'm telling you that is because you'll see at the end of this interview how important it is to actually talk about the past and the present and why these docks are so important to people who lived in this area at that time. So 1936, war broke out in 1939. Suddenly these docks become extremely important, not only to our own country but to Germany as well, because at that time we was under constant bombardment. My house was bombed 3 times. In one instance I actually lost 3 of my friends to a V2 rocket, which is not too far from here. I'll just give you one instance of, that all sounds very serious, but my father at that time was in the army and he was stationed just prior to going to Germany in an embarkation port in Tidal Basin. And he came home on leave right in the middle of a bombardment. And we was all in this innocent shelter at the bottom of the garden, and it wasn't a garden, it was a yard. And during the night my father was taken short and needed to go to the toilet. So he's gone into our outside toilet, and at that time a bomb dropped at the top of the street, severe enough to blow me out of the shelter. But then I was now more worried about me dad. So I've come out and the whole place is covered in dust and all the windows are in, and my dad comes staggering out of the toilet, and I said, "You all right, Dad?" He went, "All right." He said, "I pulled the chain and the house fell down." that's even though he was going through some really sort of tough times, the Cockney humour never left us 1 minute. It was a joy to live in that era, if you could put it that way, because the community spirit was total. We was all really up against it. We was cold and we was hungry. There wasn't enough coal to light our fires till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so it meant going to school extremely cold. And at one stage I became so thin, so malnourished, that I was sent to a residential school for malnourished kids. And the road I lived in was Jersey Road, and half the kids in Jersey Road were there with me. So it was pretty tough. Well, that's the sort of the downside of it. But it still was these beautiful docks. And these docks were, I inherited these docks because my mother's brothers were all stokers, going back many years. My father, after he came out of the army, went back to sea as a cook. And all I wanted to do was actually go to sea. So we progressed. I had a few jobs out here when I was 15-year-old, but at the age of 16 I went to a naval training school in Gravesend, and I was in catering, and the very first ship I ever joined in these docks was a boat called the Good Hope Castle, and we was only going to do a home trade job, and that was to Rotterdam, Antwerp and Hamburg. And my father being a cook, I was a galley boy in this one, and he went on board and he said to the cook, he said, "Do me a favour, keep an eye on Johnny." He went, "Johnny, look after himself." And that was it. And that was, as 16-year-old, I was off. But I think of, like, you know, my grandchildren now at 16, they seem young and babyish. But I don't know whether it was our tough upbringing in the wars and all that, but it didn't mean a thing to me. I was 16-year-old and I was off. And then that started my merchant navy career. It was the best thing to ever happen to me. The world as it is at the moment, when you can go to New Zealand in 24 hours, makes it a very, very small place. But I liked it big. I liked it when it took a month to get to New Zealand, stopping off at Curacao, going through the Panama Canal or the Suez Canal, going to Pitcairn and places like that, which is, you know, you can't drop there in an aeroplane because there's no places. But when he was going there, you actually become acclimatised to change. Half hour every night the clocks went forward, and then when you got to New Zealand you could smell the land before you got there. And then when you hit New Zealand, the places like that, I mean, I'm just naming New Zealand because that was my favourite place, but when you hit there, you know, as a seaman, you've done what seamen do, you know, and yeah, if that's your imagination. But I used to come home, and for the first 3 years of my merchant navy career, I'd never done the same trip twice. I used to go to a federation which was in the Connaught down there and ask them what boats were in. And they'd say, Highland Princess. Where'd she go? South America? Yeah, I've not been there, I'll have that. And next time I'll be Union Castle. Where'd they go? South and East Africa? Yeah, I've not been there. And I travelled all around the world in the very, very first 3 years. And then I found New Zealand. And once I found New Zealand, and then that was it. I progressed gradually through galley boy into kitchens and galleys and things like that to becoming a first class waiter. And the last trip I'd done, which was in 1960, was on the Gothic. She was a ship that the Queen had actually sailed on to do a tour of the New Zealand and Australia. And I picked her up, and I was a first class waiter on her, and I had what was called a round table, and I had a doctor and 5 passengers. And I was also at a Silver King, so the table actually sparkled. Now, when you see these great big boats, I mean, the Gothic was 17,000 tonne, which was not a bad size for these docks, but when you see these boats now when they're 170,000 tonne, do you know which ones I prefer? The little tiny cargo ones I used to pull out of it was 7,000 tonne. Because there was no stabilisers. When you used to rock and roll on those boats, you really rock and rolled. You know, you actually, the sea was the sea. Now, I'm sort of probably dramatising the romance a little bit there, but that's what the sea life was all about. And the only time I'd go on a cruise, and I don't want to knock cruises because a lot of people enjoy them, is if it had some kind of theme to it. I wouldn't go on it if it was just a Mickey Mouse or a Butlins type thing. But those days the boats were either tourist and first class or all first class, and the Gothic was all first class. And the amount of sort of class that you had on those boats, they were a pleasure to serve. So, what can I say? The Merchant Navy was a thing that young fellas and young women, some young women in the end, used to go out and thoroughly enjoy. And again, this was the time of the National Service. In 1957, I come home on one trip. Well, I think it was a Gothic again. I picked her up afterwards, and in these docks I used to come home. So I was a first class waiter at sea, and then I was in ship repairing when I used to come home. I used to always work a month ship repairing. And on this particular occasion, my dad said to me, "Well, it's going to be 5 weeks this time, John." He said, "You're going to need to work over." So I said, "Yeah, that's no problems." Well, it was a problem, because the next thing I knew, I got my army call-up papers down to do national service. And I went down to the Federation, and he said, "What's your name?" So I said, "Johnny Ringwood." He went, "Yeah, you've been called up?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Give us a vote." He went, "Nah." He said, "We've been trying to get rid of you for years." So that was it. I was in 2 years in the, in fact, even on my interview, they said, "Well, what are you?" I said, "Well, I'm a merchant seaman." I said, "I really don't want to play soldiers, I'm a seaman." So he went, "Got just the job for you." He says, "What you like on marine engines?" I said, "Funny enough, I'll do that in the docks." He said, "We'll send you to Singapore." He said, "And you know, you'll be working on tugs, doing engine repairs." So I went, "That sounds brilliant." So I come home, I spoke to my dad. He said, "What's the opposite to sea, son?" So I said, "Land." He said, "You'll be in the infantry." I went, "No, mate." I said, "He's promised me." And saw it up, go report to Her Majesty's Tower, London, Royal Fusiliers.
Oh, really?
So bang, I was away. But I had a good time. I was a year in Kenya, 6 months in Bahrain, 4 months in Malta, so I had a good tour. Come home, and then went back to, I got married then, went back to sea, but Merchant Navy is not the life for a married man. So I just had that one more trip, and then that was it. But, so what's my interest in these docks? Well, my history as a seaman, certainly, but even later in life, in 1976, I actually done the London Triathlon, and the swim was in these docks.
Oh, wow.
Now I remember, it's a mile swim in these docks. I remember in the Navy, when I was a merchant seaman, if you fell in these docks, it was a 24-hour quarantine in hospital. It was that polluted. But now, of course, it's brackish, but you know, it's okay. When I was training for marathons and triathlons, I used to run round these docks. It's a 14-mile run round the docks, and I watched this area actually die. When these docks closed, it was like the lifeblood was taken out of the area, and literally it became a very sad place. It's still not a great place at the moment, but you've got a good mayor. Sir Robin Wells is a good mayor, he's a man with a good ideal, a good future, and I think along with all this enterprise, I agreed with that. I agree with the airport, because people said, "Well, all the noise, all the sound." I said, "Listen, it's a seaport. It's never going to be never going to be a seaport again. Let's make it into another port, so it become an airport." And as soon as that airport come in, interest started to come in, Excel and places like that. So we're in between. You've got the Royal Albert Dock now. The Chinese are talking about billions of pounds investment down there. So again, local involvement. I won't be old enough to see all of that, but it's still the place to actually come in the future. I've left this area now, and I left because there was, I don't know, it's just always been a transient area, and people come in and go out. but I spent 67 years of my life in this place, so I'm not actually, you know, come lately boy. But I'll come back here regular. I train in a boxing gym around the corner there. I come back about once a month and do some training. But I love to come back down here and watch this development going on. And this now, the robin, I knew the robin when she was in the West India Quay. I worked for the LDC at the time, and I knew her. But when she came here, it suddenly lit a little flame in my head. There's another link. Yes, this is brilliant. All this future development is brilliant, but we cannot forget our past. We mustn't forget our past. And the robin is a historic vessel, 1890. One of the oldest boats in the world. Now, she needs some capital to actually get her. We're never going to get her seaworthy again, but we're going to turn her into a place where people can actually come on board, learn about the area, because there will be videos and things like that going about, learn about the history of these docks, and learn how tight those little boats were for crew accommodation, for instance. And when I was on a boat called the Dominion Monarch, one of the biggest coming here, 28,000 tonne, there was 8 of us in a cabin. That's okay in the winter, but it gets a bit in the summer when you get through the tropics. So when people go on there and they go, wow, how many crew? A little tiny galley like that, had to cook with them, and it was coal, you had to stoke the fire. And then you look at the captain, Mr. Captain, tiny little cabin. It's all of that. And I just want to see this docks. Actually, yeah, let's celebrate all this new stuff, but let's remember what went on. And let's remember how important and how hard it was to the men and women who worked in these docks before, during and after the war. My mum was a crane driver. She was 5 foot. Okay, she was a crane driver in Harlow the Walls. She worked in here, this building here, trucking 200 weights of flour around. These women were equally as tough as the men that worked in these docks. So yeah, let's remember the men, but also remember the women, because there were some characters. I'll give you an instance. We were having a street party, and this woman, I'm not going to name her, but she was a ship scrubber. Before you sailed, the women used to come aboard, a team of them, and they used to scrub the ship from top to bottom. And she said, Johnny, she said, I'm having a party, you want to come? So I went, yeah, of course. So I've got into her house, and the only thing that was missing out of her house was portholes. Everything in there had shore saddle, Unia Castle, knives and forks, plates, curtains, sheets, everything from different boats. Well, I'm not saying that, well, I suppose that was the norm, but it was just, gives you some idea of the sort of like the colourful characters that actually existed. I mean, I could give you story after story about characters that worked in these docks, and we owe it to them. We owe it to them to remember their memories and to remember how tough these docks were. Remember when you see these containers going, lifting cranes out, these boats, there was one boat in here, a meat boat, and she had like shoulders of lamb and cocks of lamb and all that. They turned that around in 24 hours. Manually turned it round, lifting and loading. Now that was a record, it has never been beaten since. So these fellas who actually work in these docks, I was in ship repair, and the dockers and stevedores and shore gangs and riggers and all the things that made these docks special, cumulatively, not secondly. And when I built the statue, when I didn't build the statue, I've got a statue over there called the Docker statue. I had the idea in 2000. I was in Sheffield, and they've got a centre there called the Meadow Hall, very much like Lakeside, and I see this beautiful statue of 3 steel workers, and I thought, yeah, that'd do. So I come home, and I was on the Canning Town Partnership. I said, look, we've got to get a statue in these docks to commemorate our past. So they said, okay John, design it. So I designed it. It's 3 dockers standing around a load, and the artist actually said, okay, how did they dress? So I dressed up as the old boy in the barrow, that's supposed to be me, and with a docker scarf and a flat cap and a milk on my shoulder. And somebody said to me, oh, you should have done this, you should have done that. I said, no, listen, that statue typifies what the docks was all about. Forget ship repairing and all that, because it was all part of it. But the main aim of these docks was to fetch cargo in and take cargo out. And that 3 dockers, 1 tally clerk and 2 dockers, standing around a load, says that. You don't need to be a magician. This is not modern art. You look abstract, you need an encyclopedia to see what you're looking at. This was a statue that actually, and it's there. And it took us 9 years to get it. And that would not have happened without the Royal Docks Trust, Newham Council, and loads of other people, local councillors, all got together behind it and went, yeah, let's do it. And in 2009, it was unveiled. and it's there. So it's now, I'm very proud of that because I was involved, and I'm very proud of the people who got behind us to actually make it happen. You've got a boat over there, okay, that what Sunrise or something it's called. It's got over there, which is probably a couple of years old, and you've got this one from 1890 in the same frame. You know, yeah, how bad's that, you know? And let's get people on board, let's look at the Trinity light buoy and all that behind her. Yeah,